Imagine listening to the faint rhythmic thumping of an unborn baby's heartbeat.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that very delicate primal kind of sound.
Right. It's the literal undeniable sound of life.
Hmm.
But now imagine taking that fragile heartbeat, amplifying it through massive stadium speakers, and then just dropping the absolute heaviest, most aggressive wall of down-tuned, distorted electric guitars directly on top of it.
I mean, that sounds like an impossible contradiction, like a total sonic paradox.
It really is. But in 1993, two teenage brothers from Brazil did exactly that. And in the process, they fundamentally altered the trajectory of heavy music forever.
They really did. It's incredible.
Welcome to a brand new deep dive. We are thrilled to have you here with us today, joining as the crucial third person in this conversation because, honestly, we have a wild story to tell you.
We really do. The source material we're looking at today is it's a comprehensive 25-crack chronological notebook.
Yeah, and it documents the evolution of extreme metal through the lens of three specific bands, right? Sepultura, Soulfly, and Cavalera Conspiracy.
Exactly, covering roughly 30 years of recordings.
And our mission today, we want to figure out how two kids from the Global South, Max and Igor Cavalera, used profound tragedy, grinding poverty, and their own indigenous heritage to entirely rewrite the DNA of global heavy metal.
It is a phenomenal text to explore. I mean, this isn't just some basic timeline of when albums were released or, how many records they sold.
All right, it goes way deeper than that.
It does. What the source provides is a deeply psychological study. We are looking at a masterclass in resilience, cultural synthesis, and how extreme environmental constraints don't just limit art, they actually forge entirely new avenues of innovation.
Right, let's unpack this, because to understand the skyscraper they eventually built, we have to look at the dirt they started in. We're talking about the city of Belo Horizonte, Brazil, in the early 1980s.
Yeah, a very specific time and place.
And the inciting incident for this entire saga isn't like a magical gift of a guitar. It is a profound, sudden personal tragedy.
The source notes paint a very stark picture of their early life here. Their father was an Italian-Brazilian diplomat.
Which provided a certain level of middle-class stability, right? Like a shield from the harsher realities of Brazil at the time.
Exactly. But he died suddenly of a heart attack. Max was only 9 years old. Igor was 8.
Oh, man. That is incredibly young.
It is. And almost overnight, that shield you mentioned just evaporated. The family was plunged into severe financial distress, moving from diplomatic comfort to, well, literally trying to figure out how to put food on the table.
So they drop out of school in their teens. They're dealing with this visceral daily poverty. They have all this anger and confusion about the hand they've been dealt, and they turn to music.
But they aren't strolling into a pristine music shop and buying top-of-the-line Fender Stratocasters,
No, not at all. They're using practically destroyed secondhand instruments. Let's look at their 1986 era, specifically the Morbid Visions record. Max is 16, Igor is 15. The recording budget is basically non-existent.
What's fascinating here is that at this stage, they didn't even have their own distinct musical identity yet.
Right, they were still finding their footing.
Exactly. The lyrical themes on Morbid Visions, the overt satanic and horror imagery, that was just them blindly copying the templates of European extreme metal bands like Venom and Bathory.
Just mimicking what they heard.
Yeah, they were looking across the ocean, trying to emulate what the British and Scandinavian scenes were doing. They were completely unaware they were about to invent a template of their own. And physically, the recording itself is the definition of lo-fi.
I want to pause on that term, lo-fi, for you listening right now who might not be an audio engineer. When we say lo-fi here, we don't mean that trendy, relaxing hip-hop aesthetic you study to.
No, definitely not relaxing.
We mean low fidelity. The source describes the drums as sounding boxy. What does that actually mean in a physical sense?
Well, it means you are hearing the cheapness of the room and the gear. A boxy drum sound happens when you don't have enough high-quality microphones to capture the resonance of the drum shells.
So it's literally just capturing the surface noise.
Right, and you're recording in a small, untreated room that traps all the ugly mid-range frequencies. It quite literally sounds like someone hitting a cardboard box.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the guitars are buzzing with cheap distortion, completely buried under the cymbals because they couldn't afford a proper mixing desk to separate the frequencies.
You can physically hear the struggle in it. It's like they are trying to build a high-performance rocket ship in their backyard using nothing but rusted scrap metal and sheer willpower.
That's a great way to put it.
When you listen to those early tracks, the hunger is audible. You hear two teenagers fighting for their lives, pushing these cheap instruments far past what they were manufactured to endure.
But, pure willpower can only take you so far. They needed better tools.
Which brings us to a massive turning point in 1989, the leap to a major label.
In '89, they signed with Roadrunner Records. This is a monumental milestone. They become the very first Brazilian metal band on a major international label.
That is huge for them.
It is, which leads to the recording of the album Beneath the Remains. But we have to clarify what major label meant for a relatively unknown Brazilian band at that time.
I'm guessing it didn't mean private jets and luxury suites.
Not even close. It meant a tiny advance. They couldn't even afford the flights to America, so the label flew an American producer, Scott Burns, down to Brazil.
And Scott Burns was essentially the godfather of recording death metal. He was used to the highly controlled environments of Florida studios.
Right, he had standards.
But the conditions he walked into at Nas Nuven's studio in Rio de Janeiro, the source describes them as downright torturous.
Think about the physics of recording in a sweltering Rio summer when the studio's air conditioning completely breaks down. It's over 100 degrees in the room.
That sounds absolutely miserable.
And the humidity is thick in the air. For a musician, humidity is a nightmare. It deadens the drum skins, making them sound flat. It causes guitar wood to warp slightly.
So they're constantly falling out of tune.
Exactly. The musicians are literally sweating all over the fretboards. On top of that, the recording console is constantly short-circuiting, and the band members are getting violently, physically ill from the local food and water.
Oh my gosh.
Burns later described these sessions as some of the most miserable working conditions of his entire career.
Wait, let me push back on the conventional wisdom here, though. In audio engineering, everyone chases the perfect room with pristine acoustics and climate control, right?
Sure, that's the dream.
But if the conditions in Rio were so objectively terrible that Scott Burns hated it, did that sheer sweaty desperation actually become the secret ingredient? Like, is that desperation the reason Beneath the Remains feels so dangerous and aggressive and became a classic?
It undeniably acted as a pressure cooker. The frustration of the gear failing, the physical sickness, the heat, all of that tension translated directly into the performances.
They were just taking it all out on the instruments.
Exactly. The playing is frantic because they are literally fighting the environment. For you listening, think about how your own environment shapes your work output. If you listen to that album through a good pair of headphones, you can actually feel the hot, claustrophobic quality of the room baked right into the tape.
Which makes the contrast with their next record absolutely mind-blowing. For 1991, they drop Arise.
A completely different world.
Right. This time, they actually have the money to fly to America. They record at Morrisound in Tampa, Florida. Working air conditioning, pristine, top-tier studio gear.
American technicians making sure every single cable is shielded and every microphone is perfectly placed.
The sonic shift is immediate. Tampa gave them clinical precision. The sound is massively fuller, the bass frequencies shake the floor, and the songwriting just becomes much more streamlined.
More sound added clarity and weight to their aggression. It made it palatable to a massive audience without losing its edge.
And that polish led to MTV picking up the video for the track, Dead Embryonic Cells, which notably was a furious environmentalist protest song.
That is the moment they shatter the glass ceiling. They achieved the coveted, polished American sound. But here is the brilliant part of this notebook's timeline.
Yeah.
Once they achieved this polished sound and global success, they didn't just stay in Tampa and crank out Arise Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4.
Right, they didn't take the easy road.
No, achieving that global standard forced an identity crisis. They realized that sounding American wasn't enough. To truly stand out, they had to look backward. They had to look deep into their own country's history.
This is the most crucial pivot in their career. They step away from pure, breakneck thrash metal. With the album Chaos AD in 1993, produced by Andy Wallace, they deliberately slow down the tempo.
They trade sheer speed for massive, heavy grooves, and they began incorporating traditional Brazilian tribal percussion into the metal framework.
That intro to Refuse Resist on Chaos AD that we talked about earlier, Igor plays this heavy, hypnotic Brazilian tribal pattern on the toms.
And underneath it, they layer the actual in utero heartbeat of Igor's unborn son.
And then the full band just drops like a sledgehammer. It gives me chills every time I hear it.
It's a masterful piece of audio staging. And it set the foundation for what would become their 1996 masterpiece, Roots, produced by Ross Robinson.
Oh, Roots.
Yeah, they took those Brazilian elements from Chaos AD and decided to build an entire sonic universe around them, pushing the boundary of what heavy metal could even be.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because for the Roots album, they didn't just stay in a comfortable studio and download a sample pack of exotic sounds.
No, they fully committed.
They physically traveled deep into the Mato Grosso region of Brazil to record directly with these Avante indigenous people. It's like a musical archaeological dig. They are physically unearthing the rhythmic bones of their country.
Just out there under the open sky.
Yeah, surrounded by the jungle, blending aggressive amplified electric guitars with ancient acoustic tribal chanting.
Think about the audio engineering clash happening there. You have the raw acoustic resonance of traditional percussion bouncing off trees and dirt, attempting to merge with the synthetic, heavily distorted tone of down-tuned guitars.
It sounds like it shouldn't work at all.
It really shouldn't. But they brought in Brazilian percussion master Carlinhos Brown to help bridge that gap with Afro-Brazilian rhythms.
And they didn't stop there. They also brought in American nu metal pioneers like Mike Patton and Jonathan Davis.
Effectively fusing ancient history with the absolute bleeding edge of 1990s modern metal. It proved extreme metal could come from the global south with a distinct local identity, deeply influencing so many Latin American bands that followed.
The Notebook also dives heavily into the thematic shift happening alongside this musical evolution. These albums are overtly, unapologetically political.
Very much so.
Territory deals with global violence and displacement, and actually features a music video filmed on location in the West Bank. Slave New World tackles the crushing weight of globalization and corporate exploitation.
And Dictatorship is a direct, visceral attack on the legacy of Brazil's military dictatorship, which ran until 1985.
Meaning Max and Igor spent their formative childhood years living right under it.
Exactly. And, when we examine tracks like Dictatorship or Territory, it is critical to view them purely as cultural artifacts.
Right, we have to be clear about this.
Yes. Regardless of where you, the listener, or we sit on the political spectrum, left, right, or center, our goal today isn't to endorse or debate these specific geopolitical stances.
Absolutely not. We are impartially reporting the lyrical themes from the source material. We're not taking sides on any of the left-wing, right-wing, or global political issues mentioned.
Right. We are looking strictly at how the brothers utilized the trauma of a military dictatorship and their observations of global conflicts as the raw fuel for their sonic evolution.
It is about understanding the catalyst. By fully embracing their indigenous roots and their complex political history, Sepultura reached an absolute pinnacle. They redefined a global genre and gained the praise of critics worldwide.
They built an empire from the dirt up.
But incredibly sadly, just as they reached the apex of this massive structure, a sudden, unimaginable tragedy shattered the foundation of the band entirely.
The timeline hits August 1996. The Roots album is dominating the world, but right in the middle of this triumph, Max's 21-year-old stepson, Dana Wells, is tragically killed in a car accident.
Just devastating. Max and his wife Gloria, who is also the band's manager, immediately leave the tour to fly home to grieve and to bury Dana.
And while they are doing this, while they are literally mourning a child, the rest of Sepultura, including Max's own brother Igor, holds a meeting and votes to fire Gloria as their manager.
Hold on, I have to speak for everyone listening right now. They fired his wife over the phone, giving him an ultimatum while he was burying his stepson.
That's what the source documents, yes.
The sheer emotional devastation of that betrayal is suffocating just to think about. How does a human being process that?
Yeah.
You would expect someone to just walk away from music entirely, just give up. Max quits the band in December of 1996. The brothers stop speaking.
A bond forged in childhood poverty and global success is completely severed for years.
How do you channel that level of betrayal and grief into a completely new creative project rather than just quitting?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of the Notebook, we see that Max didn't walk away. He transmuted that devastation into an entirely new vehicle. In 1997, he forms a new band called Soulfly.
Okay.
The grief, the anger, the profound sense of loss over Dana's death, that is the very foundation of Soulfly's self-titled debut album. It is a raw, bleeding record. He tuned his guitars even lower to capture that heavy, dragging feeling of mourning.
And the emotion resonated so deeply with audiences that the record went gold in the United States.
It did. And he didn't try to just recreate Sepultura. He leaned heavily into the collaborative, rhythmic world he had started building with Roots.
Right, the source notes how Soulfly actually helped pioneer the nu metal wave. He brought in guests who were shaping the new sound of heavy music. Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit, Corey Taylor from Slipknot, Chino Moreno from Deftones.
It's as if he lost his band family, so he intentionally built a massive new community of musicians to fill that void.
That's a beautiful way to look at it.
Furthermore, as Soulfly evolved over the next few albums, like Prophecy in 2004, Max expanded his cultural archaeology. He didn't just stick to Brazilian percussion. He started traveling to incorporate Eastern European and Middle Eastern instrumentation into the heavy metal framework.
Just continuously expanding the sound.
Exactly. He proved his creative vision wasn't tied to the name Sepultura. It was entirely his own.
But blood, as they say, is thicker than band politics.
Yeah.
You cannot keep brothers who survived the slums of Belo Horizonte and conquered the world apart forever.
You really cannot. The timeline leaps forward a decade. In 2006, Igor finally leaves Sepultura himself. The following year, in 2007, the brothers finally reconcile.
I imagine that was a monumental moment for them.
Oh, definitely. They bridge this massive, painful gap and form a new project, Cavalera Conspiracy.
I love the notes on their 2008 debut album, Inflicted. It wasn't some soft, acoustic, nostalgic reunion tour. They brought back the tight, compact, terrifyingly fast riffing of their mid-period era.
It was a full-circle realization. It proved that the specific kinetic energy between Max's downstroke-heavy rhythm guitar playing and Igor's incredibly distinctive, tribal-infused drumming was completely intact.
It's like a chemical reaction that only happens when those two specific people play together.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? When we look back at this 30-year source notebook, one detail really sticks with me.
What's that?
The text points out that if you play this music on a cheap phone speaker, or if you only listen to it in passing, it might just sound like pure chaotic noise, just aggression.
Right, a lot of people write off extreme metal that way.
But if you put on proper headphones and actually focus, it reveals itself as, I really love the source's phrasing here, carefully constructed polyrhythmic architecture.
Let's break that down for a second. For you listening, a polyrhythm is basically when two completely different time signatures are being played at the exact same time.
Which sounds impossible to keep track of.
On paper, it should sound like a total train wreck. But when executed perfectly, like Igor does, it locks together like complex interlocking gears in a watch. It is highly sophisticated.
Exactly. Wait, let me build on that.
Yeah.
It's not just musical sophistication. It's practically a metaphor for their whole journey.
Oh, I see where you're going.
They took the chaotic, clashing elements of their lives, poverty, indigenous history, global fame, devastating grief, and forced them to lock together into something beautiful and terrifying.
That's a great point, and this raises an important question for anyone diving into the source material. I'd ask you, the listener, to reevaluate what you consider noise in your own life.
Ooh, I like that.
How often are we flipping past a radio station, a playlist, or even a piece of art, instantly writing it off as just noise? What complex architecture, what deep cultural history, or what quiet genius are we entirely missing just because we aren't using the right tools to listen closely enough?
You really have to look past the surface level, which brings us right up to the present day. Today is Saturday, April 25th, 2026. Right now, contextually, the version of Sepultura that continued on for decades without the Cavalera brothers is actually wrapping up their final global farewell tour.
End of an era.
But Max and Igor, the source notes, they are currently back in the studio. They are re-recording those very first teenage albums, Morbid Visions and Schizophrenia.
Coming full circle once again.
They're finally giving those songs the massive, polished, heavy production they couldn't possibly afford when they were hungry, grieving kids sharing a boxy drum kit in Belo Horizonte. They are the surviving, thriving thread of this entire legacy.
They outlived the shifting trends, the personal tragedies, and the corporate labels. The Cavaleras altered the course of global music by taking extreme, modern noise and fusing it with ancient, indigenous Brazilian rhythms.
It's honestly inspiring.
It is, and it leaves us with a compelling thought. What other overlooked ancient folk traditions from around the world are sitting in plain sight, just waiting for the right artists to fuse them with modern technology, potentially inventing the next great era of music for you to discover?
Because who knows? The next massive, global artistic movement might just be built out of a cultural history sitting in your own backyard, waiting for you to unearth it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today.
It's been a blast.
Keep asking questions, keep listening closely to the noise, and we warmly invite you to bring more fascinating sources for our next exploration together. Catch you next time.